Hi, I'm Tony with the Amarillo Public Library. Today I'm here with Jamie Spear, owner of Lore Master Entertainment. Their organization gets involved in a lot of the conventions around the area and involved particularly in LARP, live action role playing.
Yeah, and today we're actually going to teach you how to make your very own live action role playing sword for you to be able to safely use at any convention, any field, or just to have some fun at home.
So Jamie, what is LARP exactly?
So LARP stands for live action role playing. It's a hobby where you take on a persona and then meet with like-minded individuals to play games or play out different scenarios in a high fantasy setting or even a historically accurate setting with equipment that is in keeping with the theme.
Okay. Where would someone go to start getting involved in LARP?
Where I would actually head is www.cometrylarp.com to find a chapter or an organization that meets with your own sensibilities. And you can find that just about anywhere.
Okay. So when it comes to like starting out, what is the barrier of entry and what would they need to do to start exactly?
The barrier of entry is actually very low and is very cheap. A lot of the tools and a lot of the skill set that you would need can actually be found right here at the Amarillo Public Library at the Makerspace.
Okay, great to hear. Well, so once they find the group and they're ready to get started, what is the first thing they need for whenever they're starting their first, I guess, boffer weapon as they're called?
To make your first foam boffer weapon and to make it safely, the first thing you need to find is a good core.
Okay.
To get started making your first safe foam boffer sword, you're going to need a couple of things. The first thing that you'll need is going to be a straight blade or some sort of a razor that has a safety guard on it. You may also need a pair of scissors, a tape measure that can measure out at least 48 inches in length, a Sharpie for marking different measurements that you're going to be using later, or for marking foam, clear, lightweight packing tape, grip tape, or electrical tape of your choosing, at least 2 sheets of 5x7 foamies. Hopefully, you can get the kind with adhesive backs. You'll also need a roll or at least a 2 square foot piece of closed cell blue camp foam. You can find these at different kinds of retailers like Walmart or Target or online. You'll also need fun noodle. Ideally, you're going to want the kind that has a much wider diameter than any of the thin stuff. At least 2.5 inches is what you're looking for. You'll also need something for cores. We like to use golf club shafts, or you can use 502 kite spar. And these can be found at golf headquarters as remainders, or you could even find them maybe in your garage or at home if you've discarded some. You can also go online and find kite spar available that also acts as a lightweight core. And to cut that, you'll also need a handsaw fitted with a thin blade rated to cut at least PVC. The first thing you're going to need to do is to prep your core. Essentially, you'll take your golf shaft or your kite spar and you'll use the saw to cut it down to whatever length you desire. For our project, we're going to cut down to 36 inches. You'll also need to use the razor blade to remove any other grip that may be present on your discarded golf club shaft. To get started with our core prep, we're going to take our golf club shaft and measure out to the 36-inch mark. Take it at the very base of what's going to become the pommel and measure it all the way down. From there, you're going to make yourself a mark with a Sharpie so that you know where you're going to need to cut. Go ahead and cut at that same 36-inch mark that we just made with your handsaw. You may need to use a sawhorse or something to cut over this so that you can keep the core straight and secured while you're cutting to make sure that you don't slip for safety. Once that's done, you're going to take the core and you're going to remove any of the excess grip that you don't want. Almost always you're going to want to remove this as it's not very comfortable on the hand when you're actually engaging in LARP activity. Plus, later we're going to make our own. I've already made some pre-cuts here, as you can see, to make the process easier. But what you're going to want to do is take your straight edge knife and cut firmly along the length of the grip. Once that's done, you'll have something similar to this. And you can begin to remove the entirety of that grip from the core. Once that's off, you'll be ready to proceed to the next step. After you've gotten your core cut to the desired length and removed any of the excess grip that you don't want, you'll need to take your closed cell blue foam and draw 3 circles on the foam. No more than 3 inches in diameter, no less than 2.5 inches in diameter. You'll also need to mark a longer rectangle, approximately 3 inches long by maybe about 1/2 inch wide, that you're going to use for something called a rattle guard. Now we're going to get some prep work and some safety work out of the way. Using the blue camp foam, or this hard closed cell foam, you're going to need to make 3 circles. These circles need to be approximately 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter each. What I like to do is use the interior of one of those clear foam tape rolls that we've been using and use that as a guide on to make the innermost edge of my circles. Also, we want to measure out a long rectangular piece that I mentioned earlier and measure it out to approximately 4 inches to even 5 inches long and no more than about 1 inch to 1/2 inch wide. Once that's done, you'll need to go ahead and cut out each of these pieces. Something like that would look just fine. For this particular step, it's okay to be a little bit imprecise. Additionally, when cutting out the circles, it's okay to be a little imprecise too, because the tape that we're going to apply later will help round out these edges and compress them just enough to keep them, 1, safe, and 2, looking good for your finished product. You'll repeat this step for each of the circles. Once you have your core cut to the desired length and the excess grip removed, you're going to need to cut out all the pieces on that blue camp foam. Cut out all the circles and cut out that long strip of closed cell foam. From here, you're going to affix the closed cell foam to the tip of the core, from the top all the way down. Once that's done, take your pool noodle, and for a 36-inch blade, we're going to want to measure out about 24 inches long in that pool noodle and go ahead and make a single cut to free it from the rest of the noodle. Once that's done, take the pool noodle and put it over the entire length of the blade. Once that's done, you're going to need to take the circles that you cut out earlier and affix them to the very top to make your safe stab tip. Now we should have all of our blue pieces cut out. What we need to do next is take this long piece of foam that we have right here and affix it to the very tip of our core. This is where you're going to use the clear tape. We'll be using this again later. Take yourself a piece of tape, and the first goal is going to be to secure it to the core. You can go over this several times or just once. I advise several times to make sure that you can get good compression on the blue camp. Once that's nice and compressed, the entirety of our blade assembly is going to come over this. Now, moving on to the blade assembly, you'll need to take the pool noodle that you secured. For the project that we're doing, we're looking at a total of a 36-inch blade, so the minimum that this pool noodle needs to be measured out at is 24 inches. This piece of foam noodle right here has already been pre-measured and pre-cut. If you're going to cut your own fun noodle, you can use something like this, which is a foam cutting machine that's available at the Amarillo Public Library's makerspace, or you can use scissors or a straight blade. For something like this, we're also going to need to cut the pommel, so this will be a demonstration of that. At approximately the 3 to 2.5 inch mark, you'll take your fun noodle and make that cut. Be sure when you're using something like this to keep the foam away from you and not push inside, and be sure to keep your fingers clear. You're going to take the actual blade portion that you cut and slide it over the entirety of your core assembly. This is where it's really important that this piece right here get compressed nicely so that it can actually fit into the hole that the fun noodle is going to provide you. You'll note specifically, for safety is the primary reason why we constructed that stab tip right there. This is going to cover any ragged edges that got made whenever you saw it off or cut down your core. Additionally, we'll be placing stab tips on the tops of them, like so. To do that, you're going to take the stab tip circles that we have and use another piece of clear tape to affix 2 of these circles to the tip of the weapon. Now that we've constructed the stab tips, got them cut out, and put our blade down the entirety and the length of the sword, we're going to affix these. It's helpful to take some clear tape and go ahead and affix them to the stab tips that we're creating, like so. But before that, we're going to make sure that the entirety of the blade is actually secured to the pommel right down here. Now it's important during this step to note that torque wrapping is a good idea. What torque wrapping is making sure that you're applying a significant amount of pressure to the foam to compress it down as far as it will go to safely and securely adhere it to the core. It should look something like this. Using your thumbs is a good way to apply that pressure during the torque wrap. You'll note that a lot of that excess foam is starting to compress downward and secure itself well to the core. You'll want to do this several times over, more than I've shown here, to make sure that it's safely secured. One way to test is to put some pressure on trying to pull out the core from the actual blade position. For right now, this should suffice for our teaching purposes. From there, we're going to want to go ahead and affix the stab tips. You'll note that this is protruding just a little bit. That's fine. That's part of why we took that little square piece of camp foam and put it right there. You'll put them on like so, and having this little excess of clear tape also helps you get leverage on the tip. You'll take one, put one there, and take one and put one there. From there, you'll also use additional clear tape to continue to put layers of tape all the way down. I like to do an X pattern or a plus pattern, but any way that secures it safely is ideal. Once that's done, you'll also notice that it'll help round out these edges, like you can see right here. So definitely make sure that you're taping down portions like this to make sure that they don't protrude. Now that the blade is affixed to the core, we're ready to move on to the pommel. You're going to need to take your pull noodle and measure out approximately 3 inches in length and make that cut similar to how you did with the blade. From there, you're going to take it and put it over the back end of the sword that you're constructing, and be sure to tape that down. Once that's done, you should have one remaining circle left of that blue camp foam. We're going to take that and put that over the pommel to make sure that it stays safe in case it gets used for anything other than what it's supposed to be for. Let's go ahead and take stock so far. At this point, you should have the blade firmly secured to the core. You should also have your stab tips safely secured to the idea of your blade. And you'll note here that foam compressed down as we were expecting it would, so there's no outside frayed edges or anything that comes to sharp 90-degree angles that can adversely affect safety. Once we've got that, we need to do some work on the pommel. We're going to use one of these small pieces of foam noodle that we cut earlier at approximately the 1.5 to 2 inch, maybe even 3 inch length. You'll know why the length isn't so important as long as it stays under 3 inches. Something that's helpful to do as well is to take the scissors and make little crumple marks all along the edge of your pommel, or at least the piece of noodle that's going to become your pommel. Where you made those cuts, push that right inside. You'll notice that it'll be kind of loose. That's okay, we're gonna firm that up. Much like you secured the blade here with that torque wrapping technique, we're going to do the same right here. I've used the torque wrapping technique to affix the pommel to the core, as you see right here. You'll note that the foam compressed again, similarly to how it did right here. We've made sure that it's nice and secure to the core. We can go ahead and cut that and remove it. Now, we'll take our final circle, Similarly to what we did on the stab tip, we're also going to do this with the pommel. This makes sure that none of the core accidentally protrudes and becomes a safety hazard. You'll fix this right here and secure it down to the pommel. Additionally, much like we did at the tip, you'll use tape to push the rest of this down and homogenize the entirety of this foam structure. Now that we're done affixing the blade and the pommel, we're going to want to make sure to get them nice and safely secured. What you're going to need to do is take some of the clear tape that we have, start at the very tip of the bladed portion, and circularly move it all the way down the length of the blade. It's important to note here not to put too much torque on that, otherwise it's going to compress the foam too much, and that can influence safety in a bad way. Afterwards, you're going to need to do the same with the pommel. Now that the pommel's done, it should look something similar to this. Note how we took most of these edges and compressed them down, and we have no protruding 90-degree angles that are going to make it unsafe. We're going to add an additional layer of safety at this time by securing both the pommel and the blade with a reinforcing layer of tape. Now what's important here to note is that we don't want to use the torque wrapping technique that we were earlier, where we would very firmly use both thumbs and push down as we moved along. This one we're just going to lay the layers of tape around and move down the length of the blade in a circular fashion. Starting here. You'll do that and continue to do that down the entire length of the blade. I'm going to go ahead and cut that right here and finish that in a moment so that I can demonstrate doing the same on the pommel. You'll take your pommel, similar to how we have right here, take the tape, and be sure to tape it down. Now I'm using my thumbs to secure it, but not push down and create that torque wrapping effect. Just laying tape. Practically, this also fulfills another step by adding a little bit more weight to the downside of the pommel. For those of you out there who have a little bit of LARPing experience, having weight in the pommel is a good thing. I'm sure you'll agree. Once that's done, we'll cut that off, and we're ready to move forward to the handle. At this point, we're coming across some finishing touches. We're going to want to go ahead and assemble the grip in a way that's comfortable to hold and is going to be safe. What you need to do now is cut or otherwise get the right dimensions for what feels best for your hand on those foamies. I like to cut approximately 1/3 off the total sheet and use that. Remove the adhesive back, if you got the kind that have adhesive, and roll it along where your hand grip would be. You can use one set of foamies or you can use two. The adhesive helps keep it secure. If you don't have the adhesive kind, you can use that same clear tape that we've been using to go ahead and affix it to the hand grip. After that, you can use something like electric tape or with grip tape to make another roll around that hand grip to, one, make it more aesthetically pleasing, and two, make it more comfortable for your hand. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the handle. These are the two pieces of foamies that I was telling you about. These have the adhesive backing. You'll note that there's a piece of paper that you can peel off to reveal the adhesive. Right. Now, what I like to do with these, I'm only going to use one in this demonstration, but you have a second one or more available in case you want to make the handle thicker for comfort on your hand. From here, I'm going to eyeball about 1/3 of this distance and cut it lengthwise. If we're here, sure, that's about 1/3 or at least close enough for me. Now, this doesn't have to be precise again because we're going to be rolling it over and over and over again, at least as far as the foamy will go. Once you've made your mark, use your scissors, be sure you're cutting away from you, to cut a relatively straight line. Making it perfectly straight isn't so important during this step, as there's going to be another one that's going to continue on to create the full handle. Got that, so we'll remove the paper to reveal the adhesive. Note, nice and sticky. From here, we'll lay it lengthwise on the handle. Make sure it receives good adhesion right there. You'll note that there, at this point, shouldn't be much space in between here and the actual guard. And then, you'll roll. Now the good thing about the foamies is that the foam is really, really close soft cell, so it becomes extremely malleable. You'll notice that we've got good adhesion here, and we even have a seam. Again, that seam isn't going to be so important, nor is it going to stick out very much, as we're going to continue to wrap this with something else. But you'll note it will also increase the stability of the connection between your pommel and the core, and your blade in the core. Once that's done, I like to use grip tape. You'll see this used in hockey, baseball, all sorts of different sports, and can be purchased at your local athletic store, or it can be purchased online. Some might also be available at the Makerspace at the Amarillo Public Library. Once you've got that, you start wherever your heart desires and moves forward in a downward pattern, coating the entire length of the handle. This serves a couple of different purposes. One, it covers up the seam. Two, makes it look more presentable. And three, will actually provide more grip during use during your LARP activities. That grip will be increased whether you use gloves or not, depending on the nature of your game, or gauntlets or armor or anything of the like. It can also be used barehanded to also be comfortable and be practical. Another key note here is torque wrapping is not really a concern here because the foam itself will compress to a bit. Torque wrap and apply as much pressure as is preferable to you when holding it in your hand. Once we've made that cut, we're pretty much done with the handle step. So at this point, you've done the entirety of the sword. Now all that's left is to cover it. What I would recommend is taking remaindered cloth, either from Joann's, anything you have lying around the house, or you can come to the Amarillo Public Library and use the resources at the Makerspace to construct your cover. Once you have the pieces of cloth that you want, you can get them sewn up. It'll be approximately the same length as the blade that you've constructed. So for our project, 24 inches in length. Maybe a little extra left over so that you can secure it down to the hand grip. Once you have that, you sew the cover, put it on, tape it down, and you're all set. You'll also need to do the same with the pommel. Now we're ready to cover our sword. You'll note here, I've gone ahead and attached a cover to the sword. It's gonna obfuscate the entirety of that ugly foam and tape look that we've got, right? As well as provide an element of safety. Using a cloth or closed cell cover of either muslin or any sort of linen blend, you're going to make sure that upon contact, nobody's gonna get hit with the sting of that tape. You'll measure out a certain length or remainder of cloth similar to this. You can hand sew these covers or use a sewing machine. Remainders of cloth and sewing machine can be found at the Amarillo Public Library at the Makerspace. Or you can find these articles along your own home. Once you've got it cut and measured, it'll need to be at least 3 to 5 inches past the total length of the foam blade part. You'll note here that it's a little bit longer. Why we're going to do that is because once covered, we're going to use this tape to tape it down. So, this one's already been affixed. You'll do the same for a pommel. This is just black cloth, again, remaindered, can be found at the Makerspace at the Amarillo Public Library or at your local craft shop. Sewn in right here, either by machine or by hand. You'll cover it like so. The blade portion will act in a very similar fashion, and you'll use the tape of your choice that you've used for your handle to finish affixing it to the entirety of the blade. Why it's important to use the same kind of tape that you're using for your handle is that you'll use that to go down the entire length of it and make a nice finished product like so. We've achieved securing the cover to the pommel, similarly to what we did with the blade earlier. And continue to tape down, making for a nice, homogenized, clean transition from cloth pommel to tape handle. Congratulations, you've now made your first safe boffer sword for a live-action role-playing event. Now, whatever organization you're with will have rules to check for safety and to make sure that they fall within the regulation requirements for whatever game or organization that you're with. However, you can also check for safety yourself at this step. Be sure to press in firmly on the stab tip and at the pommel to make sure that you can't feel any protruding cord. Additionally, along the length of the blade, you'll want to press in firmly to make sure that you can't feel any of the core through the foam. All of it should feel soft, yet somewhat firm, the entire length down. You've made your first live-action role-playing boffer sword. More importantly, you've made it safely. Now, any organization that you're in will have rules for how to safely construct the weapons or the items or the equipment for their game. All of them will have additional safety rules that you'll need to abide by. However, we can go ahead and do our own safety check. From here, you'll take the tip of a sword and push in with significant pressure with either your thumb or your forefinger to make sure that you can't feel the core of the blade. You shouldn't be able to feel that graphite shaft through the 2 layers of camp foam that we've used to pad this, as well as affixing it with the tape should make sure that it doesn't move. An additional check that you may want to consider is firmly pushing down all along the blade to make sure that you can't feel that core, whether you used graphite golf shaft or used kite spar. Either way, you shouldn't be able to feel it. It should feel supple enough to give, but still firm enough to bounce back in place. You can do that same thing additionally with the pommel, making sure that you can't feel any core, just a nice firm cap of foam. Again, pushing forward to make sure that you can't feel that core. Now obviously this is foam and made for safety, but it's important to remember that even with foam weaponry, it's important to abide by the set of rules that your organization and just general best practices, including not hitting in the head or above the shoulder line, not hitting in the eye, or any other place that could cause grievous bodily harm. While it is foam and it is safe, there's no reason to invite disaster.
All right, thank you for watching. I'm Tony with the Amarillo Public Library, and I want to thank my very special guest, Jamie Spear with Lore Master Entertainment. If you're wanting to know any more projects they're working on, you can find them on.
Head over to www.facebook.com and search for Lore Master. We can also be found on Instagram at Loremaster LLC.
Right, and for the public library, you can find us on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. See you next time.